We interrupt the late news to bring you a special news bulletin. Steve Bartkowski and his attorney have just arrived at the Atlanta airport. We switch you live for an in-depth interview. Well, it was a little different than Berkeley in California. So I saw then that athletes could be role models. They were the subjects of idol worship and veneration. And if they would retrace their roots and go back to the high school community that helped shape them, and the collegiate community and the professional community, and set up a scholarship fund, or work with a Boys and Girls Club, or set up a charitable foundation, they could make a meaningful impact. So that was 45 years ago. This will be my 46th draft. In football, we've represented 62 first-round draft picks, and hopefully we'll have 2 more. In baseball, I had a big practice. Basketball, boxing with Lennox Lewis and Oscar De La Hoya, and all of it based on athletes able to trigger imitative behavior.
Yeah. And why don't you talk about that for a little bit? I mean, and also maybe some of the bigger clients that maybe some of our younger students here, they're younger than you and I, but they still may, obviously, Joe Montana, people like that.
Well, we have 11 players in the Hall of Fame. The quarterback, Steve Young, Troy Aikman, Warren Moon, represented Ben Roethlisberger. Currently have Patrick Mahomes, running backs like Thurman Thomas, who's in the Hall of Fame, defensive lineman Bruce Smith, who's in the Hall of Fame, or Howie Long. And we currently have the running back who gained 1,000 yards for the Green Bay Packers, Aaron Jones, and then we'll have Jerry Jeudy and Tua on a week from tonight as clients.
Leigh, is it any different dealing with young athletes coming out today, especially nowadays, they can come out after their junior year than it was maybe back in the 80s?
Well, I think the biggest difference is that the athletes are millennials or Gen X or whatever the right title is, but they grow up with big screen, sound and color, multitasking, going from FaceTime to Twitter to Snapchat to TikTok to every form of social media. So their attention span is shorter. You better get it out in the first couple minutes. And we have all the challenges of social media, the fact that an athlete can brand himself with social media, and it's got both opportunity and danger.
Yeah. Just a couple more things for me before we start to open it up to the students. I think I know, I'm going to try to figure this out when you speak again, but I think you have a picture on your screen, and that's what we're seeing, because there's no movement there. So I'll try to figure that out in a second and let you know if we can fix that. But, and obviously there's no commercial breaks here today, Leigh, like last night. So we're good. We don't have to worry about that. But, walk us through, like you did last night, the Jerry Maguire, and I think I mentioned last night, and it is true. A lot of my counterparts in this sports business management industry feel like the Jerry Maguire movie kind of was the impetus for all of these young people to decide, wow, sports is actually a career, sports is a business, and I can work in sports. Although, seeing what Jerry Maguire went through, I don't know why they would want to do that, but walk us through that a little bit with the Jerry Maguire.
So the director-writer was someone named Cameron Crowe, and he had done a movie where he went underground in a high school called Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which was really funny. And it's a little retro, guys, but I mean, it's very funny. And so he called me and asked if he could follow me around and pick up atmosphere and content for a movie that would feature a sports agent. So when I went to the 1993 NFL draft, he came with me, and I had the first pick in that draft through Bledsoe. And when we went to the league meetings in '93, where I showed off free agents, he came with me. He came to Pro Scouting Day at USC. He came to Super Bowl parties. He came to a lot of games with me. He sat in my office and watched me. I introduced him to people, and I told him lots and lots of stories. So I was technical advisor on the movie, and so that meant I needed to vet the script to make sure that the willing suspension of disbelief that holds you in a movie didn't get broken, that you didn't think the dialogue was phony, that you didn't think, well, there's a scene there where Cuba Gooding, Rod Tidwell, gets knocked out and he jumps up and jumps around. Well, that wouldn't happen. But other than that, it was pretty accurate. And then I worked with the actors. I took Cuba Gooding Jr., who played Rod Tidwell, down to the Super Bowl and made him pretend he was a wide receiver all week. And I actually had to show the quarterback, played by Jerry O'Connell, how to throw a spiral because he had gone to NYU and they didn't have a football program there. So a lot of life is up there on the screen, and I've never been able to go out to an airport or be in a restaurant where someone didn't run up to the table and either ask me to say or say to me those 4 words that start with "show me."
Mm-hmm.
And so I worked on that film. I did another one called Any Given Sunday with which is a football film, and that was Jamie Foxx's first dramatic role. And I worked with Cameron Diaz and Al Pacino, and spent a night with Al Pacino putting him in role. And I did another baseball movie called For the Love of the Game, where Kevin Costner was a pitcher, and we've got more to come. So I'm working on with a couple writers right now.
Wow, you really like those sports romances, huh, Leigh?
Well, it's like not to quit my day job, but yes, I've been able to act in a few of them.
Yeah, well, yeah, you have, and that's also very interesting. We had For the Love of the Game is very, very interesting because sometimes when it's on, I'll watch the baseball scenes, and then when he goes to the, I watch the whole movie, but I'll actually switch away and then come back, wait for the baseball scenes again. But another very good movie. So at this point, why don't we open it up to students? Obviously, like if you want to enter something in chat and ask, and I'll ask it, or just unmute yourself and ask a question to Leigh. I know you've got plenty of material because you have the book, you've gotten a lot of stuff this semester. So why don't we start asking some questions?
Hey, Leigh, I have a question.
Please, if you wouldn't mind identifying yourself, saying your name, and then asking a question.
Robbie Lynch, and thanks for chatting. I have a question. So I looked at your Twitter feed, and besides Tua and Judy, I see a lot of like retweets and talk about Harrison Hand. He's a cornerback, kind of not as hyped up as like a first-round prospect. What do you see in him that you think he's like going to be a special player in the NFL?
He's he's high character, faith-based, and so I think he's going to have a long career in the NFL, Robbie.
All right, thank you.
I didn't catch that whole thing. I don't know if anybody else is experiencing. It looks like my screen is freezing. Is anybody else seeing that?
We were talking about Harrison Hand.
Yeah. Okay.
Who's a safety? Who's a corner safety from Temple, who's a really active defensive back.
Okay. All right. So hopefully you guys are all set. I know everybody here on my screen is now frozen. So we'll just keep going. And please.
I can see him. I can see Jeremiah, Benjamin, Nicole, Jen, Sam Lane, Soy.
Very good.
Koto, Dina Robustelli. Yeah.
All right, guys. More questions?
Hey, Leigh, this is Ben Smith. I got a couple questions for you. My first question is, well, obviously with COVID-19 pandemic being a thing, how is your preparation for this upcoming draft different from past drafts? And also, in addition to their talent, What are some other factors that you look at when you're signing a client?
So as to the first question, they suspended the ability of scouts to go to campuses, and they suspended the ability of players to have pro scouting days on their college campus, and then players' visits to teams. So what we do have is the best predictor of future success is past success. So we have game film, and then we have the players played in all-star games, and then the scouting combine was held, and you have both the testables, how fast you can run a 40, how many times you can bench press 225 pounds, a whole series of tests, and then players met up close and personal with teams. So we've been able to use Zoom a little bit for meetings with teams. We staged our own pro scouting day for Tua, and took that film and sent it to different teams. So we're able to get pretty much of all of it in. Now, when I started back in 1975, the draft was in January. And so all they had was game film and all-star games. But if you look at it, they drafted just about as well as they do today. And part of the reason is that teams get so excited if someone runs a 4.3 40, who's the wide receiver, but they don't check if he can catch, and they don't check if he's got heart and work habits and all the rest of it. So when you ask what we look for, you look for work ethic, because players that actually study film and work out all the time, they're going to be more successful. You look for character, because if you get disqualified for some reason, drugs or domestic violence, then you're not very productive. So you look for those, and we look for role models, because I want to work with players who know how to make a difference in the world. We can target problems like bullying or domestic violence or sex trafficking or the environment, and have athletes do what Lennox Lewis, the heavyweight boxer, did, which is to cut a public service announcement that said, "Real men don't hit women." And that could do more to permeate the perceptual screen that young rebellious adolescents put up against authority figures to make a difference in how they feel about domestic violence. So you're looking for character.
Leigh, are there athletes or potential draft or potential clients that you've actually turned down in the past?
Oh, absolutely. One day there was a running back, and he looked at me and he said, "Leigh, I'm my own charity." And he ran the fastest 40 out of my office I've ever seen anybody run. So yes, there are athletes that are not into being role models, that don't care about second career.
Yeah. Guys, just an FYI, my screen is frozen, and I'm not going to play with it because I don't want to lose everybody. So if you're entering stuff in chat, I can't see it. But as long as obviously Leigh can still hear me, I'm just gonna let this roll out. So please, if you're entering stuff in chat, please just ask your question. For more questions for Leigh.
I can see you fine, Dave.
Oh yeah, it must be. I don't know. It's one of those things. But technology is great, but it's got its glitches. So my screen is frozen, so all I see is a gray screen. But I'm glad it's still working. More questions, guys?
I can see the student.
Hi, Leigh. My name is Jen Parra. I have a question. Do you think that with the current situation that players can expect a renegotiation of their contract because owners are taking a huge hit on revenue losses? I mean, even if they open, they're probably going to have strict social distancing laws that could only have 25% of stadium capacity.
So each sport, Jen, is going to be different. They're talking about taking the NBA and moving all the players to Las Vegas and testing all of them. So what they would pick up would be maybe a few games at the end of the season, but they'd basically take the standings as they were, and the players who qualified for the teams that qualified for the playoffs, and they'd have them do that. So they had played most of the season but 16 games. And but obviously they would play in front of no fans. So that's going to be a revenue hit in terms of that. So they're going to have to work out between the players associations and each league what they'll do. Baseball is talking about taking all the players to Arizona. And again, they got cut off right before March 26th, which is when they would start. And but again, no one knows how this would work, because you'd have them quarantined. They'd be tested all the time, and they'd play in the Arizona spring training stadiums. Hockey's talking about going to North Dakota, and we don't know what will happen with football. You guys have been hit in New York the hardest of anybody in the country. So that where there's like 180,000 cases in New York, we only have 18,000 in California, even though our population is much higher. So it's all going to depend on the state of where this virus is and how contained it is, and because safety will be the first priority. But yes, there'll be less revenue. Football training camps wouldn't open until August. So we're April 15th, so that's 2 weeks in April, May, June, July, and no one really knows. You see all these projections that people make, and then California originally was supposed to have 8,000 deaths, and now the projection is 1,700. So, you know, we were quarantined early in the process.
Well,
But
that's a good thing.
they'll have to work that out,
Yeah.
because you're right, there'll be less revenue.
Good question.
Hi, Leigh. My name is Matt. So my question for you is, from reading your book, it seems as if you were a psychologist for your athletes as much as you were a mentor and business partner. So over the course of your career, what would you say is the most important thing you've learned about the psyche of athletes?
The most important skill that I could suggest studying is psychology, as you said, because, and then the most important skill is listening. Can you create a climate of trust with another person and get deeper and deeper and peel back the layers of the onion? Because it won't come as a surprise to some of the women here that men don't tend to share quite as easily about their deepest emotional feelings as women do. Women tend to have better access to that, you know, and men want to posture and be macho. So what you need to do is get below that surface layer and talk to players about concepts like short-term financial gain, long-term financial security. It would be geographical location, the weather, the lifestyle, big city, small city. It would be spiritual values. It would be family considerations. It would be endorsements. It would be making a difference in the world. And then it would be the sports considerations, being on a winning team, the quality of coaching, the system the team runs, the facilities, winning and starting. So in each person, that constellation of values is going to be different. And so what you really need to do is get down and deep into the psyche of someone you're representing. If you can hone your listening skills and try to put yourself in the other person's shoes and see the world the way they see it and get into the heart and mind of another human being, then you can work your way gracefully through life. So it's trying to cut below the surface, Matt, to get into what each person uniquely feels, you know, about their life and how you can fulfill them.
Very good. Good question. Anybody else? I can ask questions of Leigh all day. I just, here's my question. Here's another one.
No,
Dave.
Danny was talking.
Danny Swindler was speaking.
Okay, I'm sorry. Like I said, I'm frozen here, so I can't. Go ahead, Danny.
I could take over for moderating if you want, Dave.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, I see your question up here. Probably Warren Moon. Warren Moon was someone who, the NFL was different back in 1978. They were not as sympathetic to the concept of an African-American quarterback being the quarterback. There was a fair amount of racism, and there was some doubt as to whether the so-called thinking position, center, safety, quarterback, you know, whether blacks had the aptitude for that. So Warren went to Canada instead of going to the NFL, and he was there for 6 years. Then he came back as a free agent to the NFL in 1984, and he was the first real free agent. They didn't have free agency in the NFL till 1993. And because we could talk to a variety of different teams, he got the biggest NFL contract of all time. And then he played for 17 years in the NFL. So that was a total career of 23 years. So we really sort of grew up together. And I mean, I was 6 years older than him, but we went through life together. And ultimately got voted into the Hall of Fame. And one of the great privileges that I've had was to be his presenter in Canton, Ohio at the Hall of Fame and to give his introductory speech. So he became one of my best friends. So probably Warren Moon. I mean, you'd love Patrick Mahomes. He's, if you like him on the field, you'd love him off the field. He's totally grounded. He's considerate. He cares about other people. He spent his off days building houses for homeless people and, you know, working with kids. He's really incredible. Don't be shy.
I'm still frozen here, so I don't see the chat. So I don't want to touch anything because if I log out of this thing, then we're all gone. So
well, I can see some questions.
Okay, good. So answer those questions. That's fine. I can't see anything. So.
Okay, from Deanna Robustelli, the old GM of the New York Giants for years was Andy Robustelli. I don't know if you're any relation. No. Your question is, with how saturated the sports industry is, what is some advice you have for people that want to become a sports agent or work in the sports industry? We do agent academies for all across the country. We did one at St. John's in New York last year. We've had to suspend them, but what happens at the Agent Academy is we take a group of students or older people that want to change professions, and we actually have you get up and try to recruit players, okay? So we had a group recruit Patrick Mahomes as a client, right? He's a college player, now you have to recruit him. So we broke people into teams, and then they had to go ahead and use their best skills to try to recruit a client. We had some of them, half of them played general managers and half of them played player agents, and they had to negotiate a contract. We had them do damage control with like a Baker Mayfield, you know, or someone who had problems, and you get up in front of a of a press conference and you had to present their best arguments. We have you set up a charitable foundation. Now we're doing that on Monday and Tuesday virtually. And so you could go to steinbergsports.com and we teach you everything you need to know about being an agent. Now, as to working in the sports industry, we run something called the Sports Career Conference. And we have 1 hour, which is sports media, anchor people, and other folks, writers. We have one which is how to brand or market, so it's sports marketing. We do another which is how to work for a team, a league, a conference, or a athletic department. And we do another on sports entrepreneurship. So you could come to one of those and take a look at the differences. Well, if this doesn't clear up, the coronavirus, we'll probably do more virtually. So if you go to our website, steinbergsports.com, you can find that. To be an agent, you have to be certified by a players association in that sport. So to be an agent for an NFL player, you have to be certified by the National Football League Players Association. You have to have an undergrad degree and you have to have a post-grad degree. And then you have to take a test on the collective bargaining agreement. You have to pass a background screening test, and then you have to follow their rules and regulations. You also have to be in compliance with the state regulations in each state. And then you need to be in compliance with what's happening on campus. So the most important thing to learn is how you brand yourself. So any of you you all ought to be on LinkedIn. You ought to hit people on LinkedIn. You can hit anybody in the sports industry. Older people will love to mentor you. So you just go on LinkedIn, put up a thing, and you can hit anybody in the world of sports and start to build contacts. Then you can have an expertise in the field. You could go to law school or business school or sports marketing. I didn't think that law school was particularly necessary to be, a sports agent. The contracts are all standard contracts. So those would be some tips for getting started. The economics are not that great in football because the agent has to pay for the player's training. So a player will end the season in football, then in January he'll go off to training, and that can cost $20,000 to $30,000 for the agent, and the agent has to pay that fee. So it can be tough. Let's see, here's one from Jen to everyone. If there was one quote to describe the way you live, what would it be? So my father raised me with two core values. One was to treasure relationships, especially family. And the second was try to make a meaningful difference in the world and help people who can't help themselves. So my mission in life is to ease suffering, to help people, to take on problems in society. But if I had a philosophy, it's to always be present in this moment. People tend to live in the future. Well, things are going to be this way in the future. Or the past. Well, my real life was, when I had these friends and I lived in so-and-so. But this moment is all we have. And if you put every bit of focus you have into this moment, and the concept of killing time is crazy because time's the only thing we have. If you can put all your focus, every bit of energy into focusing on this moment, and then when you're done, you move on to something else, that's the key. So what can you get out of this hour that we're talking together? Is there anything you can pull from it that might be helpful in your own life?
I'm going to jump in. Hopefully I'm not stepping on anybody. Like I said, it's still frozen, but I'm glad you can hear me. And Leigh, that was very solid information there. We've talked to a sports attorney who's not an agent, but works with attorneys and does a lot of contracts. Does a lot of the foundation stuff for a lot of athletes, including Saquon Barkley and LeBron James and a bunch of other guys. We've talked to an agent who just had an undergraduate degree. So we know that, some agents like yourself have law degrees, some agents don't, but I would assume it's a big advantage to you having a law degree to do contracts and things like that.
Well, Dave, you don't technically, I'm a lawyer, I'm a member of the California Bar, but I don't technically practice law when I'm being an agent. You're a certified agent. And the contracts that players sign with teams are standard player contracts,
Right.
Meaning that every single player signs the same contract language, and you can't change anything. So there's really not much lawyering to that. Setting up a charitable foundation is something you could do if you were an agent, and you didn't have to be a lawyer. The chief thing that being a lawyer helps is it gives people in the world a sense of credibility that you at least have that training.
Good.
Let's see, here's a question from Olive. From your grandfather, you gained experience in entertainment, and from your time in college, you gained experience in politics. Other than participation in producing movies, why haven't you ventured more out into those other fields? Well, first of all, I could be a political figure, but right now, like when I want to take on the environment, I put together a sporting green alliance that went to stadium, arena, and practice fields to take sustainable technology and recycling, resurfacing, water, solar to stadium, arena, and practice fields to drop carbon emissions and energy costs, and to set them up as teaching platforms. So rather than being a political figure, I can have more power here to do that. We set up an anti-bullying program, taking athletes at the high school level and training them not to be the bulliers, but how to promote tolerance. And you could change that. So in my other life, I set up a program with Madeleine Albright, the Secretary of State, which was called Adopt a Minefield. And we demined minefields in Angola, Mozambique, and Cambodia. I also set up a program called Steinberg Leadership, which trained about 8,000 people in the fight against hate. So it trained them how to work with local police departments, spot skinheads and hate groups, intervene in those crisis situations, and intervene in schools to promote ethnic tolerance. So the point is, my father used to say to me, when you're looking for someone to make a change in the world and you're waiting for older people or someone else, political figures, he would say, you could wait forever. When you wait for they or them to do something, you could wait forever. And he would say to me, the they is you, son. You are the they. You have the responsibility to go out and make a difference. So I still try to do that. And then I also write, I've written 2 best-selling books. I've written chapters in anthologies. I write every week for LinkedIn. I do 2 columns a week. I just got done writing for Forbes for 7 years. I write for the USA Today on football. I'm making plans to write another book. I just chose a profession that was everything I like to do. I love sports, I love movies, I love writing, I love, making a difference.
That's tremendous. Are there any other questions in the queue, Leigh, that I can't see?
No, I can see them all. Olivia's scratching her head, so.
I have a question, Leigh. It's Nicole. You mentioned earlier that you had an online pro day for Tua, but with Tua coming off of an injury, the talk about him not being healthy and that he might be a concern, how have you been marketing him as a good asset and pick?
So it's especially hard because if teams can't come and give him a physical themselves, then the last physical they had was at the combine. And he's healed for 2 months since then. So what we've had to do is use the team doctor at Alabama and the doctor who operated on him in Houston and have them send out reports to teams that show that he is healthy and they give him a clean bill of health. Then we taped a pro scouting day where he threw to receivers like Jerry Jeudy. So it was 70 passes. It was the same sort of pro scouting day you do on the campus. So they could, and then we sent the video to teams so they could at least see he was healthy, right? And that he was running around. But it's difficult. What happens is all the teams are spread out and then rumors start to circulate, right? In other words, somebody said 2 teams had flunked him on the physical. Well, that would have been back in February, and he's healed quite a bit since then. But this is where I have to be upfront and interactive with teams. So like Detroit's a possibility for him at number 3, and then Miami's a possibility for him at number 5. And then after that, the LA Chargers at number 6. And then the question is, would somebody trade up over Detroit to the number 2 position to take Tua, if it was Miami or if it was the Chargers? So that's what will happen on draft day. But you've got to be constantly interactive with teams, or something like that could really sink somebody.
I like that answer, and that's a good question. And here's one, just in your years of experience, is there a team, and granted that some of these teams, obviously there's a lot of turnover in their upper management, but is there a team that you prefer to deal with, or is there a team that you say, that might draft one of your players and you go, I don't want to deal with these turkeys?
Yep. Well, look, so the key to all this is, what's the quality of ownership? Do they have a long-term plan? Are they stable? What's the quality of their front office? Do they know how to draft and put a squad together? Do they have a philosophy? What's the quality of the coaching staff? So you take a team like New England, and they've won amazing amounts of championships and games. Well, the system's not set up for them to do it, but obviously they've got superior management. The Cincinnati Bengals have the first pick, and since we're keeping this all between themselves, that's not a place I would want Tua to go because they lose all the time. I've had 2 quarterbacks there whose careers were ruined, and they haven't won in a long time. And nothing against Cincinnati, but it's, not the biggest city or most marketable city in the country. So we would much prefer Miami or the Chargers. And then Detroit might take him, and there's pros and cons there. So, so in this situation, again, this is just between the class, we would hope a team would trade up and over into the number 2 position to take him. And Miami has 3 first-round picks, so they got lots of ammo to move up.
Hey, Leigh, I have a question. Do you think that the team that takes Jerry Jeudy is going to have to trade up to get him? And do you think he's going to be the first wide receiver off the board?
Jerry Jeudy, Robbie, is the most disciplined route runner I've seen come off a college campus in quite some time. I mean, he runs superb routes. He also has explosiveness coming off the ball. If you look at their bowl game, he just dominated. And but this is the deepest wide receiver draft that there's been in years. There might be as many as 20 receivers go in the first 3 rounds. So I think he goes somewhere between like 10 and 13. A team like the 49ers, a team like the Raiders, who draft in that position. I think he's got it's between him and what's his name, DC Lamb, and then they have a second wide receiver at Alabama, Ruggins.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
but I think he's got a good chance to be the first wide receiver.
Want to ask you a question? Yeah, sure. This is my son. Leigh, this is, if you can see him, this is Jarrett. This is senior Gettysburg.
Hi, Leigh. I was wondering do you think because of what's going on right now with the coronavirus and how we're seeing a lot more online pro days and things of that nature, in the future, do you think we're going to see even more online pro days from kids who might not have been scouted as much as the top picks in the draft, or do you think it's just going to stick to the traditional ways?
Teams like to see players up close and personal. So if you give them their preference, it would not be a Zoom, it would be standing there watching a pro scouting day. So I think they'll return to that. But I guess my point is that in 1975, when I started with Bartkowski, the draft was in January. And if you compare the 75 draft to like the 2005 draft, they drafted just as well with more limited information. So you get paralysis by analysis. And I think when you look back at this draft, it'll be just as productive. Every year in football, anywhere from 33 to 40% of the first round ends up being underproductive or not productive and ends up not with teams if you look back after 5 years. So they make plenty of mistakes, especially when you get down the round a bit. In other words, at the very top, you've got, in this draft, they've got Chase Young from Ohio State or Isaiah Simmons from Clemson, or Okudah from Ohio State. Those guys are going to be great players, and the quarterbacks ought to be okay. But when you get down that round, I mean, who knows? It's sort of a crapshoot.
Leigh, I just want to go back a little bit in history because you're somebody who's represented not just football players, baseball players, boxers, Oscar De La Hoya and whatnot. And you also had a role in keeping the Giants in San Francisco when they were actually being enticed to move to Florida. What was that all about?
So I think it's inconsistent for a team to claim the loyalty of fans, to say you're New York Giants, right? And that's the implied obligation to support the team in bad days as well as good, to be a loyal fan, to spend money on seats, to spend money on memorabilia, to watch the games. And then all of a sudden, when they want to move, leave the area, unless they have real economic needs. So when the Giants had signed a sales agreement with the Tampa Bay, a group in Tampa Bay that didn't at that point have a team, the mayor asked me if I could step up and do something about it. So the first step was to convince the National League it was against the best interest of baseball to allow the team to move. That the second step was to figure out a stadium plan. Third step was to find local buyers. And the fourth step was to keep the morale up so people didn't think it was a fait accompli. They didn't think that, well, they've already signed. So I led the effort, and we saved the team, and then I got sued from those prospective owners in Tampa Bay for $3 billion. So if you want to talk about blood out of a turnip, that would be—
That's pocket change to you though, right?
Yeah, that would be that situation. I got out of it because I was advocating free speech, but
Nice.
and then I did the same thing with the A's. The mayor of Oakland asked me to help save that team, and we kept them in Oakland. And then I was chairman of Save the Rams back in 1994, and I did such a great job. They moved to St. Louis for 20 years, but I helped bring them back. I just think if you say that the New York Yankees are as much a part of New York as the Statue of Liberty, right? Then you can't turn around and move the team unless nobody's supporting them.
Leigh, can you tell the story you told us last night about the two quarterbacks you represented from New York? I thought that was funny.
Well, New York's a rough market now, and your papers, those tabloids, have some of the most hilarious headlines I've ever seen, like the Daily News and the Post. And so I was representing Dave Brown, who was the quarterback of the New York Giants, and I was representing Neil O'Donnell, who was the starting quarterback for the New York Jets. And I was back for the game, and both teams lost. And as I got to the airport, I looked on the back page of the Post, and the headline was, "Which New York quarterback stinks most?" Which is, a little bit tough.
That's New York in a nutshell.
There you go.
Guys, any last questions for Leigh before we let him go? We do appreciate him spending the time with us.
Look, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm in the dark. It's like.
I blame Robbie Lynch because ever since he asked this question, I've been frozen. So I'll have to lower his grade a little. That's all.
That's not good. That's not good. That's a character issue right there, Dave. You're a second rounder right now.
Second? Jeez, I'll take it. Any last thoughts or questions for Leigh before? And then
I'll answer this one last question, Dave.
Yes.
How did I stay motivated during the low points in my career?
Yes.
So I fought with alcohol. I'm 10 years sober, but it was a rough fight. And I realized I had to go to sober living and put aside my practice. And the thing that saves you in those tough moments is resilience. Life is going to push you back. You're going to have all these reverses. You just can't help it. It's just if you're active in life. But the question is, after you get knocked down, can you get back up? Can you see the light at the end of the tunnel? If you see a barn filled with defecation, right? Can you see that there might be a pony in there somewhere? Can you visualize better days? Can you see beyond your circumstances at that point to realize that you can work your way out of wreckage? So it's resilience. It's and having optimism about the future.
That's great. Who asked that question, Leigh? 'Cause that was a good question.
It was Delaney Boyer.
Okay, good. Thank you. Is that it on the chats for questions?
Another question from Megan below that.
Okay, thank you.
Can you describe a situation where you had a dispute with a client? Yes. So this will be another non-repeatable story, but I was representing a running back named Eric Dickerson. And he was playing for Indianapolis and he wanted to be traded. So I worked out the trade, and the minute he reported to Indianapolis training camp, they would trade him to Atlanta. Now, if you go public, if you're a player and demand to be traded, it's the best way not to get traded, because teams will see that they've got a troubled player on their hands, right? And they won't offer very much in trade value. So you don't want anything public. So Eric kept telling me, well, if I show up, they're not going to trade me. I said, Eric, I'm telling you that the owner of Atlanta told me he'd make this trade. He said, no, they're not going to trade me. I said, Eric, if you were standing on a 90-story building, you would have a group of people around you that would say, you want to jump? Law of gravity doesn't apply to you. Go ahead, jump. And I said, that's not my role. My role, you're going to get fined and suspended if you don't show up to training camp, or you show up and you'll get traded. He said, no. And he didn't show up, and he got fined $2 million, and I separated from him as a client.
Wow. He was a heck of a running back, too.
Yeah, he was good.
Yeah. And for those, again, this is a younger group. I don't know what their knowledge is of SMU and what happened at SMU and with Craig James and Eric. It was basically they got the death penalty after that and they had the Pony Express, I think they were called, and they had a good tandem there, right?
Yep, they did.
Yep. Okay, so again, guys, I'm sorry, I'm frozen here, but please stay on for a second after Leigh cuts out. I want to just do a little housekeeping. Leigh, I can't thank you enough for last night, for the clubhouse, for today. You're tremendous. Would like to circle back next week with you one-on-one, just briefly, just to chat about some of the things that you mentioned that I think we can work together on, and then we'll go from there.
Well, good luck to you all. Again, if you check our website, steinbergsports.com, it's got loads of information there about how to make it in sports as a career.
Beautiful. Thank you, Leigh. Appreciate it.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank you, Leigh.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leigh.
Thank you.
Robbie, what did you do to my computer? All right. So for those of you who are doing the Leigh Steinberg final project, including the book, the movie, etc., for the year, for the final project, you don't need to do a recap on this, because that will cover it, I assume. So why don't you just do, you can skip that. For those of you who did the scheme, you can, and hopefully you all got to see that, because I thought it was pretty interesting. You can use that for any project that you have done or haven't done. Everybody has to do a final project, obviously, but for those of you who are going through recapping John Pace, Steve Olenek, and all of the content, please send me a recap on this particular Leigh Steinberg speech, whatever you want to call it. But any questions for me? Any thoughts, comments, concerns? All right, guys, then we'll just we'll say adieu. I'll let you know if we have somebody next week. We're winding down here, and I'd like to see a good job with some of the discussion stuff on Blackboard. There's some really good stuff there, and I like it when you personalize it to yourself. That's really it's nice, and I thought Leigh was great. He's a good question about his. People don't want to ask those questions about people, but the guy is very upfront about his drinking problems, and he did. He built a career. He lost everything, and then he rebuilt it. So it's really quite a great story. And like he says, I'm friends with him on Facebook. He'll accept your friendship on Facebook, on LinkedIn. So you should do that. And like I said, he will post. I think he just recently posted how many years on the sunny side of the street. So God bless him for that. Okay. You think they heard me?
Thanks, Dave.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
We heard you.
Dave. Thank
Yeah,
you.
also on our end, Dave, we've been
Well,
able to see. We were able to see you on the camera fine.
oh yeah.
On our end.
All right. I was glad I wasn't giving you the finger the whole time then. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Good job with the questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Dave.
Thank you.
I don't know. I'm just going to wait because
You might be able to put it if you.
I know I don't want to. I didn't want to do it during the thing.
Well, yeah, definitely not. I mean, now that's
I'll do
over.
it now. I'll do it now. Yeah, because I was recording it. That's probably why it froze.
Oh yeah.
Wait for the program to respond.
Yeah, because I
See,
feel
it's
like that's
doing
what you've
that
been
here.
doing.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah.